Hello, I'm Prateek and I'm your biology mentor. And today we are going to start a very important topic under the unit genetics, and that is pedigree analysis. Before we start, let me just tell you what is pedigree and what is the main procedure and why it is applied and how it is helpful for us to get better understanding of human genetics. So basically, in this pedigree analysis, we usually follow a particular trait that is being inherited from generation to generation. We just follow a path, and in that particular path, we can easily determine whether it is Y linked, X linked, autosomal, if it is dominant or recessive. We'll get to know it. So let's just start the study of pedigree. But before that, let me just tell you how many type of symbols do we study in pedigree analysis. So as you can see, there is a square box which is actually representation of a male. When we talk about female, it's a circle. In case of where sex is indeterminate and sex is not given, we can use this symbol. If there are numbers written in the box, whether it is male square or the female, that number represent the number of individuals. When the size of the symbol is short, that means it lived for one day. If there is an arrow with the square box, it means proband male. Now, what is proband male? Proband male are the category from where the genetic study of pedigree starts. So they can be called as the initial one. From there, we can start our genetic study or genetic study in pedigree analysis. So similar in case of female, there is an arrow with circle. If this symbol is for stillbirth, and if we just cross oblique line in the square box, it means the deceased male. Similar in the female, there is a oblique line in circle, there is a deceased female. If there is very small projection over here, this means the miscarriage. If complete box is darkened, that means the male is affected because it's a square. If the circle is darkened similar way, that means a female is affected. What is meant by affected? Affected means the particular trait or disease is expressed by that particular individual, and it can be seen physiologically as well as. If we just see this kind of symbol, it is for pregnancy. There is a P letter inside. If we just find these lines instead of full darken, that means affected genetics of individual in history, like his genetics of disease, his genetics of particular trait. Similar in this case, circle is represented in a same manner. Then we talk about this symbol. This symbol actually for examine male, the male which we are going to learn about, the area of concern, that is examine male. If there is very small projection over here, it's examine female upon the circle. All right. So these are very important symbol. Like if we just connect the square box with the circle, that means the marriage or mating, normal mating. But if there are two lines together parallel, that means the close relative mating, or which we can call consanguineous marriage. If there is dotted lines over here, it means extramarital mating and all. Similar in that case, divorce and no children. If there are no children, it will not be represented as uh, the daughter cells, but instead this is the symbol for if there is no children. Now let's just talk about this symbol. It means there is a same origin of two lines which represent two male, like that means two square, that means fraternal twins, because they are not connected. If they are not connected, that means they are fraternal twins. But the same symbol, if both the daughter cells are connected, they are called as identical twins. In case of female, it is also just like that. Similar symbols with circles, the fraternal twins and the identical twins. There is another symbol just like that, a dot inside the circle. It represents female as a carrier. Now what is carrier? Carrier means female itself is not representing or expressing that particular trait, but carrying the genes for it. So she is a carrier. Another symbol, there is bracket like structures over the square box. That means the child is adopted. That means there is no direct genetic history with this child. Similar in case of female, there is a bracket over the circle. So adopted female. So these are some common pedigree symbols which we can use in pedigree analysis to understand it more. Let me just give you some examples, and I will teach you some rules so that we can easily determine whether it is autosomal, dominant, recessive, or X-linked or Y-linked. So let's just try to understand it. So we have three examples over here. We will take one by one. Let me just take the first example. In that particular example, what we can see, there is a male affected. As I said, the darkened surface is represented or expressed as the affected one. So here the male is affected. Now as you can see the pattern, there is another male is affected over here, and again in the last generation there is only male. So what you can observe from this pedigree, that only males are affected. In this pedigree, what you can say, that only males are affected. So what does that mean? Yes, it means that this trait, this particular trait is Y-linked. And that's for sure. If only males are affected, that means it's a Y-linked trait. You know why? Because only male can transfer the Y gene or Y chromosome to the daughter cells. Female doesn't have the Y chromosome. So if it is transferring only to the male characters or male daughter cells, then this particular trait is totally responsible or totally related with the Y chromosome. So this was the first case. Now let's just consider the second case. If it is X-linked or autosomal, we can easily determine the X-linked or autosomal by this example. Now, as I said, here female is affected. There is a simple rule in case if we want to understand that whether it is X-linked or autosomal. There is a very simple rule, and that rule is number two. First rule is about the Y-linked genes, as we have already discussed. The second rule is about the whether it is X-linked or autosomal. So the second rule is, if it is X-linked, that it should follow this pattern. Male will affect female, female will again affect male, and then this male will affect female, and so on, no matter from where it starts. Let me just give you another example. Female will affect male, again male will affect female, and then this female will affect male. So you got the point that it will always affect in crisscross ratio. Like male will always affect females and female will always affect male. How is this possible? It is possible because it is X-linked. How? because as you can see, female will have double X while male will have one X and one Y. So if it is Y linked, it could only transfer to the male candidate, but here you can see there is a female also which is affected. So that means it is not Y linked, that's for sure. Now how it is X linked or autosomal, we can determine easily because we have the rule. So let's just find out. Here is a female which is affected. How the X only travels in crisscross. That's the point. Male will give X to female. That means if this X is affected, if this male is affected, it also has X and Y. So if this X is affected, that means this X is transferred to female only. Alright. And this X cannot be given to male because male cannot give X to male. Male only gives Y to male. So it cannot transfer from male to female. It cannot transfer from male to male. This is the case. If it is X linked, it cannot be transferred from male to male because male to male there is only one transfer, that is Y linked. Okay, now let's just see here. Now this male, it also have X and Y, and after mating it is transferring its affected trait to the female. That means we are sure, like female to male, and male to again female. So that means this pedigree is for sure X linked. But how can we determine if it is autosomal? So this is for X linked genes. Let me just write it down here. So this is for X linked traits. Okay, so this is for X linked traits which we can determine very easily if we just follow this pattern, or if pedigree follow this pattern, we can easily say that it is X linked. Now how can we determine? This is the first part of this rule. The second part of this rule is if male can affect both male and female, and this can be only possible because of the autosomes. So if this pattern follow, it means that if this pattern follow, this means the disease is autosomal. The disease or the character, it is autosomal. So in any kind of pedigree, I will show some examples also. So in any kind of pedigree, you can easily determine whether it is autosomal or X-linked. All you have to do is just try to find out if there is any kind of crisscross pattern, just like that, male to female, female to male, or it will start from female, the proband, female to male and male to female again. So because we understand very clearly that X can be transferred from male to female only, and that X is transferring from female to male also. So if some trait can be transferred from female to male, it could only be X linked, because if it is Y linked, then it cannot be transferred from female to male. Alright, so Y linked is clear, X linked and autosomal is clear. Now let's just see this third example, what it actually is all about. In this third example, we will learn about our third rule, and the third rule is all about whether it is dominant or recessive. So how can we determine if it is dominant or recessive? So if it is dominant or if it is recessive, we can easily determine that. And how can we do that? That dominant never skips generation. Dominance never skips. What does that mean? That if there is a trait which is dominant, it can never skip generation. As we have another example just like that, Y-linked. Y-linked disease are actually dominant disease. So as you can see, it never skips generation. That means there is first generation F1, this is second generation F2, they are parental, this is F1 generation, F2 generation, and other generations, but each generation have the affected people, or each generation have the character that has been inherited. That means in each generation the character is expressed, that particular character which we are studying. So it must be there in each and every generation, then it is called as dominant. But if it is just like that, there is no individual in a particular generation, that means it skips the generation, so it will be called as recessive. So you can easily determine over here, you have a pedigree right here, so you can determine whether it is dominant or recessive. Yes, of course, there is a skip of generation. As you can see, this generation doesn't have any affected individual. That means this pedigree or this trait skips the generation. So it will be the recessive one. Okay, so these are three golden rules which you can determine any kind of pedigree very easily. There are some more. I will just mention all those together, and some other pattern also. We will start studying the examples also. So let's just start it. So let me just 1 second. So let me just tell you all three rules all together. So the very first rule is all about, if character is violent, character or trait is violent, then it can only be transferred from male parent to male daughter cell. So it can only be transferred from male to male only, because Y chromosome can only be given by the male candidate to the male candidate. So this is a very golden rule. If you are seeing a pedigree where only males are affected, so it is a very specifically violent character. Now the rule number 2. The rule number 2 is about whether it is autosomal disease or it is X-linked disease, because Y-linked we already discussed. So in case of the second rule, in this rule, what we can understand, if male parent, we can say parent, affects female daughter cells, okay? So female daughter cells and female to male again, that means crisscross pattern. So if there is crisscross pattern from male to female and female to male, that means it's a that means it's a X-linked character. And the second part of this rule is, or if this is the first part of rule second, and this is the second part, if male, let me mention, if male can transmit it into both male and female, then the character, then the character or trait is autosomal. Then the character is autosomal. So there is a second rule which has two part. The very first part, it's a very easy trick to remember all those things all together and to solve pedigree in seconds. Okay, I will show you some examples so that it would be more clear to you. So okay, so now let's just talk about the third rule. In that third rule, what we have learned, let me just 1 second. All right, so what was the third rule? Third rule was all about the third rule. The third rule was all about whether it is dominant or recessive. So very simple rule here, that dominant trait never skips generation. It never skips generation. That means it must be present in all generations all the time. There must be an individual which must be present as affected. Okay, so there is no chance of skipping generation. While in recessive, trait, it can skip generations. All right, so we can easily determine if there is a pedigree where some generation or one generation skipping the trait. There is no individual that is affected in that particular generation. That means the character is recessive, because dominant character or dominant trait never ever skips the generation. So we have all three rules. The very first rule is about the Y-linked genes. The second rule is about the X-linked or autosomal characters. And the third rule is about the dominant or recessive character. Now, let's just consider some examples, and then we apply the same rules or same knowledge, and let's see if we can answer those questions or not. So as you can see, there is a pedigree which we can before answering that pedigree, let me take you to the simpler one, then we'll come back to this pedigree again. Okay, there is a another pedigree. First of all you have to do is to understand whether this trait is dominant or recessive. First of all, let me just tell you that this trait is recessive or dominant. All you have to do is to guess. First of all, the parents are not affected. So there is a one more line which we can add in this dominant or recessive rule, that in this case recessive parents, or maybe I should write it a bit more clear, that unaffected parents can have affected children. So unaffected parents can have affected children, or affected parents, vice versa, affected parents can have unaffected children, both the cases. Now as you can see in this particular pedigree, what you can see, the parents are unaffected but they have the affected children. So this trait exactly determines that this disease is recessive one. Got it? So this particular disease is recessive one. Now let me just take you another example. All right. Okay, let me just draw one more example of it, then you can understand it more. Okay, let me just draw it. All right, let me just draw it first, then I'll tell you. Okay, so pedigree is ready. Now let's just talk about whether it is recessive or dominant. How can we determine? So if there is a male affected over here, and there is a female also affected over here, all right, and then we find a male affected again. So what we can determine how much uh, knowledge we have right now. Okay, first of all, male to female and female to male is transferring. So there is a crisscross pattern. Crisscross pattern. So this represent that it is X-linked. X-linked. All right. Okay, now let's just see. All generations have at least one individual affected. That means never skip generation. Never skips generations. So it never skips generation. That means, what does that mean? Crisscross pattern means it's X-linked, and never skip generation mean it is dominant. So this particular trait is dominant. So we can easily determine that. Or if the trait is only following male to male, then it is Y-linked. If trait is following, okay, now let's just see, it was X-linked because this pattern shows. Now what happened if I just do this? All right, if all are affected in a similar pattern, if all are affected by male, that means it cannot be X-linked. Now it will not be X-linked because there is no crisscross pattern, because male is affecting both male and female, both are affected. So in that case it is not having the crisscross pattern. Instead, each gender is affected. In that particular case, what it could be? So it could be, or it is, definitely it is autosomal. So it's an autosomal character or autosomal disease, whatever we are talking about. All right. So this is very easy if you just remember those rules, or if you just remember these things, it will be more easy for you. But now let me take you to another example which is quite different. So let me tell you about this example which we previously skips. Okay, now as you can see here, this is the first example. Let me just clear it a bit more. It is not completely visible. Okay, now you can see it very clearly. So in that particular case, let me just tell you, let's just first discuss this first example. Okay, in this first example, the female is affected, and then male and female both are affected. Our first observation at glance what it could be, if female is capable of affecting both male and female, that means it should be autosomal. All right, very simple, very simple. But let me just take you to another level. Okay, Female is affecting both male and female children. Okay, now let's just see here. This male is not affecting female. We must have seen the crisscross pattern, but there is no crisscross pattern. Only again female is affecting both male and female again. All right. Here also female is affecting both male and female again. So it could not be just autosomal disease. There must be something else. What is happening here? That all males, those who are affected, they still can't inherit the same character to their children. That means male just can't inherit this property. So what is happening here? It's not autosomal. It is called as maternal inheritance. Now, what is maternal inheritance? It is also called as cytoplasmic inheritance. Cytoplasmic inheritance. Okay, so what is maternal or cytoplasmic inheritance? Let's just concentrate on this word, cytoplasm. So as we know that the cytoplasm can be transferred in reproduction, but only of female, because there is a position, or which you can easily say that there is only egg which has its own cytoplasm, because sperm, when actually sperm reaches to the egg, it lost all its cytoplasm and it can only enter its nucleus. And we can say male cannot inherit their cytoplasm to their children. So if something is not coming from the male, but it is coming from the female in both the children's, and all the children's are affected female parent. Listen to me carefully. If all children are affected from affected female parent, then it must be a cytoplasmic inheritance or maternal inheritance. That means only female can affect those. So the character is transferring from only female. All right. So these are some basic patterns of pedigree analysis. So we have learned all the patterns which are very basics, and there are lots of questions which you can solve by remembering these things. So enough for today. So we'll meet tomorrow, and we'll talk about some more examples of pedigree, and I will tell you some more disease related pedigree analysis. So till then, take care.